In this video, I'm going to walk you through each of the different modes that we have in the Tween tool to adjust the keys on your curves and start blending between your different poses. Let's talk about the Tween tool. I think a lot of us are familiar with it and how it works in other tools. Let's dive into what Unreal has to offer us. So here I am in shot number, what shot is this? This is shot 65. We've got Beta here grabbing and lifting this big old thing and throwing it. And I've extended the shot a little bit so that we have a little bit more runtime at the end, just to sit with the pose. Now, what we're gonna do is I'm gonna show you how the throw can be modified using the Tween tools. So now with all this motion in mind, I wanna just grab the main controls to sort of pilot this animation. So I'm gonna go ahead and just grab maybe the body. I don't know if the hips are in use, but I'll grab that too. I'll grab the upper shoulder, torso area. Grab the neck, grab the head. I'm gonna grab the hands. This one is currently using IK, which means I also need the pole vector for the elbow. I'm going to need this hand, which is an FK. So I'll grab the hand, the elbow, the upper arm, and then can't forget the shoulders for both of these. He's doing a big throw, which means that the shoulder is gonna be a big part of this. And then I'll also grab the actual canister. That's what's moving that. Now with those things all selected, I'm back in my sequencer, and these are the keyframes on the curves for those specific controls. So what I'm gonna do now is go scrub around and find here, he goes to grab, he does this power lift, and then wah, he starts to throw it. So maybe I wanna mess with this. I'll go right here, I'll set a key, I'll grab this key in particular, and now for this pose, we're going from this kind of squash and stretch to the throw. He's getting ready to chuck this thing. But here on this frame, I'm gonna zoom in maybe on this blue control, I guess, or this red one. What is this red one? This is the arm. This is the left arm IK. That's a great example. So let me turn all this off. Here you can see we're gonna focus on this one key on this one curve. But if I wanted to do tween adjustments, using the blend neighbor, what's going to happen is with nothing selected, it'll apply to everything on this frame for my selection. If I start dragging this, it's going to leave the pose in the current position. All these controls will stay where they're at, but they'll start to blend from their current location towards the adjacent keyframes on the left or the right, right? So the frame 169 or frame 175. So if I start to drag this, I start right here and I start to blend to the left. If I come this way, I start to go back to this original pose and blend to the right, right? But the main thing I'm trying to point out here is that blend neighbor, when I start to move this thing, it's just blending from the current location. That's very different than the behavior of tween. If I drop this down and go to tween, tween behaves very much the same way, except that as soon as I start to move it, the arm is going to snap. It changes drastically because using the tween slider is going to take any individual curve here. You'll see we have this key, and then this one is not exactly right in the middle. It's kind of towards the bottom. So if I take blend neighbor, it'll just start here and adjust from that current location. But if I switch to tween and I start touching it, this becomes a 0% and 100%, meaning this is 50%. The moment I touch it, every single one of these keys snaps to the 50% point between the adjacent keyframes. So tween is nice if you want to override your current pose and put this pose right in between the two other keys. Usually though, blend neighbor, there's a reason that this is the default. So if I click all the way on the left, it'll just say, hey, copy the last keyframe, boop. And now it's done that. No animation really happens here, except for something with the elbow, which I'll deal with that later. But I can blend out of that a little bit here or whatever. So blend neighbor and tween work very much the same, but their behavior is just to either keep the current pose as the base or override the base and just jump to the halfway point. Now blend ease is a nice one because I can use that to sort of create an ease keyframe. The further I go towards the right, the more like the right key it's going to want to be. So I go just a little bit from that, it becomes an ease in for the right adjacent key. If I go all the way over to the left, just about, it becomes an ease out of the left adjacent key. And if I start to go kind of in this middle area, it just becomes a softer or a more aggressive blend. So blend ease just helps you to find a way to favor one or the other pose. And so in this particular case, I could blend out. So he squashes in, and he starts to blend out and starts to throw it a little bit sooner, if that makes sense. So blend ease is just a quick way to generate ease keyframes. Push pull will amplify and de-amplify a pose. And so whatever the curves are doing, you have to focus not on the pose in the viewport, but on sort of the data in the curve editor. So here you can see this red curve, right? It came down to this plateau, and I've kind of kept it at this plateau, and then it goes back vertically. If I push this and I go more amplification, it's going to extend that curve as if it had momentum and kept going in that direction, which means I'm going to get more of this squash pose in the direction that was already going. I can go more, and I can really break my pose here. But what this is doing is amplifying whatever the current pose is and saying, give me more of that tension. Whereas pulling it says, hey, go back towards wherever you were before. It'll undo the pose a little bit. And so here he will squash out and then immediately start to throw. It does not hold it at all. Versus if I go back to blend neighbor, I can go ahead and just say, hey, go back to where you were before. But then there's another thing you can do. With all of these sliders, you can also switch them to overshoot mode. So if I'm saying, hey, you know, I like this pose, but I don't want to hold it in place before just going back out to the throw, I actually wish I could exaggerate this. One trick you can do is, maybe I'll come back over here and I'll say, hey, the next pose is going to be that compression. So I'll go in the middle. And I'll say, I wish I could blend to that compression, but then go beyond it. If I hit this little button here or hit Control U activates or deactivates overshoot mode. It'll allow me to say, hey, let's go ahead and match that adjacent keyframe and go beyond it. And so I can even get more compression. Now it's a little out of order. So what I'm going to do is just copy this value to this key where I'm doing my changes. So now he kind of compresses and then compresses a little bit more, and then he goes to throw it. Now you can see with this silver curve, what that did is that I basically had, you know, if I wanted to overshoot the following key, this is only going to take me up to the adjacent key. But if I turn on overshoot mode, I can switch this on. I can hit the adjacent key and go even beyond it, right? Just like that. And so you can see I've gone beyond the adjacent key. And the trick here that I use is I'll just get rid of this follow-up key and move this to take its place. And that will give me really cheap and easy overshoots. Whee! And I can turn this back off if I don't want to keep it that way. So now we've covered blend neighbor, we've covered tween, we've covered push pull, we've done blend ease, move relative, time offset, and smooth rough are next. Now, smooth rough is probably the easiest one to show you. And that's if, you know, we've got animation happening. I can take these keys, I can switch to smooth rough, and what it'll do is if I drag to the left, it'll just smoothen out whatever the keys are doing. Maybe I'll focus on this red one, and I'll look at this data here. And if I take this section here and I say, hey, smooth, it will basically reduce the contrast between the different points. Whereas if I go rough, it'll add contrast and try to make bumps bumpier. So hopefully that's, you know, decently clear. This one's really nice for adjusting all of the animation in an area and saying, hey, I want to smooth everything out, or I want to make everything a little bit more jittery. Drop this down again, and we've got time offset. Now, time offset is interesting. It's a bit of a weird one. What it will do is it will keep the frames on which keys have been set. And so the keyframe data will stay on these current poses, or will stay on the frames, right? I'm not going to change the timing of the keys, but what it will do is it's going to basically take the values inside the curves and offset that to other nearby keys. So it becomes kind of like a wave. If I grab all of these keys just like this, and I move the time offset, it'll take this shape and push it. See how I'm basically moving the entire key, like set of data? The keyframes stay in the same spot, but the data inside of them, the values, kind of get moved to retime stuff. So it will retime the animation without changing the actual position in time of the keyframes. So this will basically let the whole throw happen sooner without changing my key times, if that makes any sense to you. So visually you can see I'm retiming the animation, but it's not like doing this and shifting the actual keys in the timeline. So that's time offset. It's a little bit weird. And then last up, if I switch over to move relative, this one's really handy to connect bits of animation together. Now, move relative is a weird one. It sort of allows you to connect big selections of data to other parts of your graph or your curves. So let's just say I had all this data and I had animated something here, but maybe I copy pasted it from elsewhere and it got copy pasted like over there. And for some reason that made sense. I think it's now going to be very broken. Yep, freaking out. But we say, oh, no, that animation is exactly as I want it to be. I don't want to change anything. I just want to like reconnect it to something else. I can use this selection and I can say, hey, connect to the left keyframes or connect to the right keyframes. And so if I just say, hey, go ahead and just lock on to that final pose or whatever. Now when I come back and look at it, it should just reconnect. And there we go. It's good to go. So what it does is it just takes data and just boop, links it back up. Very handy for taking like different animation clips or mocap moments and sort of reconnecting them to when there's offset animation or things like that. So move relative is kind of a specialty one. Some of these are things you use in very specific cases. Others like blend to neighbor or push pull or blend to ease, you use them just truly all the time. And so again, you can use them in the curve editor themselves. You can use them in the viewport, and whichever place you have your mouse is where the hotkeys will take effect. So if I, for example, hold down the U key and click and drag, it's going to use blend to neighbor in the bottom one. But if I have the top one set to tween, so if I'm holding U and left clicking over here, or if I'm holding U and left clicking up here, it's going to use whichever one I'm in the window of. And so if I only have one, then it won't do anything up here, but it will do it if I hold U and left click down here. And so U is your hotkey to activate it. Control U is your overshoot mode. Shift U will cycle through them. And that is a quick run through of your different tween tools.